Young, and the Restless spoilers. For years, fans of Genoa City have watched Billy stumble through life as a man torn between potential and ruin, brilliance and self-destructs. They wanted to believe that perhaps Sally, fiery and determined in her own way, could be the anchor he had always lacked. Together, they had moments that flickered with the possibility of stability, even happiness, but in a city where no relationship is safe from sabotage, illusions never last long. What many did not expect was how quickly their fragile union would be tested, not by their own choices alone, but by the relentless influence of Jill, a mother whose love for her son has always been as suffocating as it was fierce. Jill had never truly trusted Sally, seeing her as yet another opportunist trying to tether herself to the Abbott fortune, and though she kept her distance publicly, she observed from the shadows, intervening in ways that Billy never fully understood. It was Jill's paradoxical affection and attachment so consuming it blurred the line between care and control that prevented Billy from ever stepping into true adulthood. Every attempt at independence was met with Jill's disapproval, her manipulations cloaked as protection, until he grew accustomed to being the boy she would always rescue, never the man who could rescue himself. The shocking revelation that Sally was pregnant with Billy's child sent ripples through Genoa City, catching even the most skeptical observers off guard. For some, it was the glimmer of hope that Billy might finally step into responsibility, that fatherhood would transform his reckless spirit into one grounded by duty and love. Sally herself saw the pregnancy as a chance not just for a family, but for redemption. After years of betrayal, mistakes, and survival against harsh judgments, she wanted to believe that carrying Billy's child would prove she was worthy of more than suspicion. To her, this baby could be the bridge that brought her and Billy closer together, cementing their bond in ways that no meddling family member could break. Fans dreamed that perhaps this time would be different, that Billy's transformation into a father once more would be the catalyst that gave Sally the respect and security she had been denied by so many. But happiness is never left unchallenged in Genoa City. Jill, upon learning the news, did not celebrate, did not offer congratulations, did not even conceal her rage. To her, Sally's pregnancy was not a blessing but an unforgivable threat. In Jill's mind, Sally was not a woman capable of nurturing Billy into stability but a manipulator who had deliberately ensnared him with a child. The Abbott matriarch, consumed by her peculiar brand of love, refused to allow this child to be born. She saw the baby not as a chance for Billy's growth, but as an anchor that would drag him further into chaos. And so Jill acted in the way she always had, by intervening, by controlling, by using her influence to bend others to her will. The secret meeting between Jill and Sally was the kind of moment that shapes entire storylines for years to come. It was not held in a boardroom or the familiar setting of the Abbott mansion, but in a private, neutral space where no one could overhear. There, away from the eyes of Billy and the rest of Genoa City, Jill laid her cards on the table. Her voice, calm yet razor-sharp, cut into Sally with precision. She made it clear that she did not want the child born, that the pregnancy was an obstacle she would not allow. Jill offered a deal cloaked as protection, insisting that it would be better for everyone if Sally terminated the pregnancy before it altered Billy's path forever. Her reasoning was twisted, but in Jill's mind, it was justified. She had spent years watching her son spiral, and she would not allow him to bind himself to a woman she believed would only drag him down further. For Sally, the proposition was a dagger to the heart. She had expected disapproval, yes, but not this. To be told by the mother of the man she loved that her unborn child was unwanted, that it was better raised than embraced, forced her into a position she had never imagined. Jill's words carried weight not only because of her authority but because of the underlying threat Sally could feel in the air. Jill had power, connections, and influence in Genoa City that stretched far beyond Billy's comprehension. If Sally defied her, she risked not just losing Jill's approval but having her life systematically dismantled. The unspoken bargain hung heavy: give up the child, or face consequences that might destroy her place in Genoa City altogether. This meeting, cloaked in secrecy, set the stage for a new war and fought not with corporate takeovers or boardroom battles, but with the most intimate stakes possible: the future of a child and the survival of love. Sally's determination to carry the baby clashed directly with Jill's refusal to allow it, creating a collision course that would draw Billy into the heart of the storm. Billy, oblivious at first to the extent of Jill's interference, still struggled with his own identity. The news of becoming a father again rattled him, forcing him to confront questions he had long avoided. Could he rise to the challenge this time, or would he fall into the same destructive patterns that had haunted his life? For once, he wanted to believe he could change, but the shadows of Jill's control loomed large, and Sally's trust in him wavered with every moment he failed to fully break free from his mother's grip. The more Sally tried to shield the pregnancy, the more Jill escalated her efforts. She worked quietly, pulling strings behind the scenes, planting seeds of doubt, whispering in ears that could make Sally's life unbearable. Her interference was not out of hatred alone, but out of that peculiar, twisted love for Billy that had always been her curse. Jill could not distinguish between protecting her son and controlling him, and in this blindness, she risked destroying the very thing she claimed to love. What she did not anticipate, however, was how deeply Sally would resist. For Sally, this baby represented not just survival but defiance. After a lifetime of being judged and underestimated, she would not allow Jill to erase her child as if it were a mistake to be cleaned up. As the secret war intensified, Genoa City braced itself for the fallout. The news of Sally's pregnancy had already stirred whispers, but the undercurrent of Jill's demand for termination, if ever revealed, would ignite scandal like nothing before. The abbots would be forced to confront the truth of Jill's obsession, and Billy would have to decide whether to stand by the mother of his child or remain under the thumb of the mother who never let him grow. Fans who once hoped for happiness between Billy and Sally would soon find themselves watching a story not of romance fulfilled but of love tested to its limits. The pregnancy that could have saved Billy might instead become the battlefield that destroyed him. And in the heart of it all lay the cruel irony that Jill, in trying to preserve her son, might be the one to shatter him forever. The moment Jill uttered the words, the world seemed to collapse around Sally. The proposal was so cruel, so mercenary, that at first she could only stare in stunned disbelief. To ask her to terminate her pregnancy was one thing, but to reduce the life she carried inside her to a bargaining chip, a number on a piece of paper, shattered even the small thread of trust she thought Jill might one day extend. In a surge of rage and heartbreak, Sally lashed out, her voice shaking with fury as she screamed at Jill for daring to interfere in something so intimate, so sacred. She called out the hypocrisy, the twisted logic of a mother who claimed to love her son but would sooner destroy his happiness than allow him to choose for himself. The meeting that Jill intended to control slipped, for a moment, into chaos, Sally's words slicing through the air like knives. But Jill, as she had done all her life, did not flinch at anger. She waited, silent and immovable, letting Sally's fury burn itself out. And when Sally's voice finally broke, when the exhaustion of shouting left her vulnerable, Jill seized the opportunity to slide her true weapon across the table, a deal. Her tone shifted from harshness to a dangerous calm, the kind that masked poison in honey. $5 million, she offered. A fortune that could free Sally from every judgment, every financial burden, every trace of instability. Jill painted the picture with precision. If Sally agreed to terminate the pregnancy, walk away from Billy, and release him from the binds of fatherhood, she would be rewarded. She could leave Genoa with her head held high or remain and rebuild her life in the city, untethered from Jill's son. Jill made it clear the money would buy Sally's silence, her compliance, her disappearance from Billy's world. At first, Sally scoffed. The thought of placing a dollar value on her unborn child was grotesque, unthinkable. And yet, as Jill's offer echoed in her mind, Sally's rage slowly gave way to uncertainty. For all her fiery determination, Sally had lived most of her life struggling, clawing her way through hardship with little to show but scars and judgments. $5 million was not just a bribe, it was escape, security, the kind of freedom she had never known. The temptation was undeniable, and though she hated herself for even listening, she could not silence the thought that perhaps this was her only chance to finally control her own destiny. Jill knew exactly how to strike at Sally's deepest wounds, offering her the one thing she had never truly had: stability. But behind Jill's polished words and her mask of maternal concern lay a truth that Sally could not yet see. Jill's hatred for her ran deeper than simple mistrust. She saw Sally as a threat to the Abbott legacy, a woman who, if allowed to bear Billy's child, would forever bind herself to the family Jill had spent a lifetime protecting. Jill's love for Billy had never been the soft, nurturing kind. It was possessive, consuming, a love that demanded he remain a boy under her shadow rather than a man who could stand on his own. Sally, in Jill's eyes, was the embodiment of everything she despised: ambition disguised as affection, a woman who dared to believe she could mold Billy into something better. Jill could not tolerate the idea that someone other than herself would be the catalyst for her son's growth. And so her hatred turned venomous, her solution merciless. What Jill failed to consider or perhaps underestimate was the cost of such a scheme. For even if Sally yielded to the pressure, even if she surrendered her child for the promise of fortune, betrayal has a way of festering into destruction. Sally, exhausted and cornered, found herself caught in a storm of choices. If she refused, Jill's wrath could strip her of everything, from her standing in Genoa City to her future with Billy. If she accepted, she would live with the guilt of extinguishing a life, of betraying the man she loved, and of becoming complicit in Jill's control. And yet, the dangling promise of $5 million whispered to her fears, offering her a way out of a life she was not sure she was strong enough to handle. But Jill's promises were never meant to be honored. The so-called compensation was a lie, a manipulation designed not to reward but to annihilate. Should Sally agree to the terms and sacrifice her child, she would discover too late that Jill never intended to pay a cent. The deception would be complete, Sally left with nothing, her womb empty, her love with Billy destroyed, and her trust obliterated. Jill would watch from the shadows, convinced that she had saved her son, blind to the wreckage she had caused. But what Jill did not foresee was how such a betrayal would inevitably circle back to her, how the truth, once uncovered, would stain her legacy in ways that even she could not escape. The danger of Jill's plan was not only in its cruelty but in its arrogance. She believed she could orchestrate the destruction of Sally's motherhood in silence, that Billy would remain ignorant of the deal struck behind closed doors. But Genoa City is a place where secrets never stay buried, where whispers travel faster than truth, and where every act of betrayal eventually finds its way to light. If Billy were ever to learn that his own mother had demanded the death of his unborn child, his love for her would transform into something darker than anger. It would become loathing, a severing of the very bond Jill had spent her life suffocating to preserve. Sally, caught in the web, found her strength wavering. The thought of screaming the truth to Billy was met with fear that he would not believe her, that he would choose his mother's word over hers. The image of Billy, heartbroken and enraged, haunted her as much as the image of Jill's cold satisfaction. In the end, every path seemed to lead to destruction, and the silence that followed Jill's ultimatum weighed heavier than Sally's own heartbeat. And so the stage was set for a tragedy greater than either woman anticipated. If Sally chose to protect her child, she would face Jill's unrelenting war, a battle of influence and manipulation that could strip her of everything she held dear. If she chose to accept Jill's money and surrender, she would be forever haunted by the betrayal of herself, Billy, and the child who would never breathe. Yet the cruelest twist was that no matter her choice, Jill's treachery guaranteed the outcome. Sally would lose, one way or another. What Jill could not understand was that by orchestrating this dark bargain, she was not saving Billy but damning him. For the moment the truth emerged, and in Genoa City it always does, man she claimed to love would turn against her forever. Jill's empire of control, built over years of deception, would crumble, and the son she sought to protect would see her not as a mother but as a monster. And Sally, though broken and betrayed, would rise from the ashes with the fury of a woman who had been pushed too far, a fury that would burn through Genoa City until justice was hers.